All right, welcome to the Hoops Cat Pod. You are entering a new era for me and for my podcast career. Thank you for making the Hoops Cat part of your daily routine. Hopefully, it stays that way. You're home for the UConn men's and women's basketball. We're available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Big East Podcast Collective, Big East Energy Collective, where passion meets precision. Before we dive into the show, let me address a couple things. Really appreciate anyone that has already subscribed to Big East Energy. It's going to be a collective that the Hoops Cat Pod they'll sit on. So this will be the daily UConn men's and women's show. This is a men's show right now. We're going to talk about the portal, about Dan meeting the media, his top 5 players in his Hurley era, and then we'll touch on the Sweet 16 tonight. Kind of a postmortem of what I wish we would be playing tonight, but we're not. But if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I know that those of you who have rode with me with Locked On UConn are probably like, what the hell happened? Look, I broke a rule and I take full responsibility for it. It really wasn't done in a nefarious way. I had a guest on, and Aaron Torres, and believe me, Aaron, this is not Aaron's fault. He feels awful, and it's my fault. I should have been more attuned to what my contract stated, and I kind of was a naive in that respect, and just kind of allowed him to, promote a promo code for SeatGeek that is a direct competitor to Locked On's Game Time, the ad that we would run on the show. And so that caused a huge issue. I don't know if it cost them any money but the potential of it really kind of irked management, and they sent me packing. So shit sucks, but you know what? Life goes on. I'm not going to stop covering the team. I'm not going to stop the momentum that I've created in this year, the grind of doing at least one show and then 2 shows starting in October. So we're going to keep doing it. And so if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. All of these episodes will also be available. Also will be available on Apple and Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast, and we'll continue to be the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world. And that's where the title of the show comes, the Hoops Cap Pod. We're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. All right, let's get into it. Enough of my horseshit stuff that went on. Some new portal news. We have a new name in everything that we talked about on yesterday's show, which was on Locked On, still stands. I still think we should be going after guys that we feel comfortable with, that we essentially already offered. That includes wings. Like Mackenzie Mbaku, like Isaiah Coleman. But when we talk about the portal in general, we're going to go to a website right now that I'm going to talk. Yeah, the new name that is kind of popular in the transfer portal right now amongst UConn fans is Amari Monroe, 6'7", forward from Quinnipiac. He started his career at Wofford. I don't hate it. I think if you could potentially have him as a 2 guard, because look, if we lose Jalen Stewart, then I totally understand them trying to replace with a similar profile, 6'7", 6'8", 220. And now this guy's older. This would be his 4th or 5th year in college. He signed with Wofford back in 2022 from the SoCon. He entered the transfer portal in 23. He played a year with the Bobcats. Now he's back in the transfer portal. This is his 2nd time transferring. We've had success with 2-time transfers. I know Cam was. So, like I said, I don't hate it. But to me, when I talked to Tobias Bass yesterday, it actually helps with to understand that there's going to be a lot more players that are entering the portal. We're going to talk about the Sweet 16 later. People are going to lose tonight, and there's players that are going to go in that portal right now, between Florida, between Maryland, Arkansas, Texas Tech, Duke. Who's Duke playing? Arizona. So there's plenty of opportunity left and plenty of players that are going to be left in this portal. So I wouldn't pinpoint it down to just kind of like the local guys like him, like Amari, like Isaiah Coleman, things of that nature. But I do think that the portal is going to go crazy after the Sweet 16, because if you think about who's in it and what's the types of players that are involved, like there's that kid from Pittsburgh, the 7-footer from that can shoot it a little bit. He's rail thin. They're the two brothers that are both like 6'11". Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Jorge Diaz-Graham. Both of those guys are transferring from Pittsburgh. Both are 7 foot 6'11". I don't know if that's a package deal that they go someplace, but man, if you can get one of those guys, I wouldn't hate on that. Get some size, get some ability can shoot the three. Kanan Carlisle is transferring from Indiana. That's an intriguing fit, because I feel like a lot of these kids go to Indiana because the money's good, but then they realize the coaching wasn't great. And I don't know if DeVries is going to be able to keep all these guys. Also, and this is not me taking a shot at Locked On. Trust me, I'm just talking about this because all over the country they don't know about the Providence trolls that we know, like the Rob Reinhardts and like all the Friars that kind of create these accounts, right? And so that whole like UConn's under investigation for Bobby Mullins, saying whatever he said to the reporter in Charlotte, of which he apologized for, and that's already a non-story, so we can move on. But the whole idea that like the Raleigh Police Department were involved, like shows were actually running with that. The Indiana show that's on Locked On ran with it. I did a crossover episode with him when we got the Braylon news, and I know Indiana fans were very disappointed with that, losing out on Braylon Mullins. Braylon's not going anywhere, because that was the show. It was like, can they flip Braylon now that there's all this turmoil with UConn? There's no turmoil, guys. Like they lost in the second round. It sucks, and they're in the portal. It is what it is. But I just had to address that. It's pretty funny. I don't see anybody that like I absolutely feel like I have to have in the portal. I'm gonna total staff. They're gonna try to bring in, one of the guys I mentioned on yesterday's show with Tobias was the kid from San Diego State, Nick Boyd. I do think that there's an opportunity there for him he's a New York kid, to come in and be the starting point guard next year. Would love to see that. Look, like I said, how many players are in the portal? I think it's over 1,000 at this point, or 574 is the official number, but there's more than that. And so for me, the idea, like Pop Isaacs entered the portal. Can we take him from Creighton? That guy was an absolute baller, and he got hurt last year. Junior, 6'2". I know everyone wants a 6'5" guard, but I wouldn't mind having a really very confident 6'2", 6'3" guard that can carry us down the stretch when we're looking for folks to make plays. Because if we had, like if in the Florida game, you give me a guy you give me Shabazz Napier. Shabazz wasn't tall. Pretty good player. Kemba Walker, pretty good player. You give me a guy of that caliber, Walter Clayton Jr., we win that game against Florida. End of story. Like, if you put like, I know this is not a shot at Aiden. If we had Kobe Brea, 6'6" shooting guard that was playing a little bit of on the point this year for Kentucky in their offense, handling the rock a little bit. If you have Kobe in that game against Florida, you win that game, because he's gonna take 7 threes and hit 3 of them, at least 2, and that's all we needed in that game. We needed someone to be a little more consistent. We didn't have it. All right, moving on. Dan Hurley met the media yesterday. Listen, I love listening to his press conferences, because just like when I've covered them in person, the yawns are never going to stop, by the way, no matter what I do, whether I own the show, whether I'm on a network. I am Captain Yawn, partly because I get up at 7 and try to get all my stuff done before I get up here and start recording and working on the business. But Dan met the media. he was raw, reflective, very Dan Hurley. He didn't sugarcoat, the highs and the lows, the big road wins at Texas, Creighton, Marquette, to the lows of, Maui and, injuries, tournament disappointment. He described the past 3 years as one long season. And that makes sense because it kind of strings along. You win one championship and then two, and then the pursuit of the third. He called it emotionally and mentally competitively draining, right? His quote was, "These last 3 years have felt like one long season. You get attached to it and it's complicated." Totally agree with that. I really feel like, he always pours his heart and soul into these press conferences. There's never really any coach speak. He admitted that it took an emotional toll, and it probably took a toll on this team to be the hunted after, the national title wore on him, and that he's looking forward to getting back to being the hunting versus the hunted. And so I think that's 100%. I thought there was a really good question. Like, he talked about rewiring in the press conference I was at in Raleigh. And, what was interesting about it was, he said something to the effect of, he's going to try to grow, but the question was, you're in like day 3 of the process. Like, how is it? Like, what's that like? He's like, there are ways I can get better. And this is what I love. He said, I am not changing the way I coach. That's what built this thing. That's how I got here. He 100% is right on that. Do not change. Coach, do not change. He acknowledged his emotional intensity, kind of poking fun at himself for the tunnel moment in the Florida loss. He said, a final act in a wild 3-year run. He spoke on the portal, really candidly about roster building in the NIL. He called the current model like the NBA or G League. It made it clear that UConn won't poach players midseason, a shot at programs that do. I think I've, and this is not a shot at UConn by any shape of the imagination. I trust Dan and I believe him. However, I do think that there's people that act not for him, but on UConn's behalf that kind of see where people are at, and it's not dissimilar to the way things were done in the past. Like when NIL wasn't a thing, you would not being the coach, but like if I'm part of a program and I haven't told Dan Hurley I'm going to do this, there is definitely actors within the UConn building, and I don't know who they are, and I'll just be completely clear about that. But I know other programs that have done this where they're doing things the right way, because truly Dan Hurley doesn't know what's going on, or Kamani or Luke or whoever, right? And a staffer or a friend of a friend will go, "Hey, you ever think about UConn?" Or what, you ever think about such and such? And because they're looking for, they know what they're looking for. They're looking for a point guard. They're looking for a big athletic wing because they feel like they may lose some folks. They're looking for shooters because they were inconsistent this year. They're looking for guys to play defense because the defense was bad this year. So, they're not recruiting players off of other people's teams while the season's going on, but there may be some people throwing out feelers. That's all I'm saying. But he emphasized the need to rebuild a championship roster, hinted at needs on defense and pace. Hurley also named past portal success stories like Joey California, RJ Cole, Tyrese Martin, and Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton. And they know what they're doing in this space. Like, there's just there's nobody that I trust more than Dan Hurley and his staff on who to bring in, and also like who to essentially let go. That's what this is. There's no sugarcoating it anymore. Like, if a kid checks out and then kind of plays so down the stretch, or kind of wanes in practice because he's not playing the way the minutes that he wants, then it's time to keep moving forward. Also talked about the Alex Caravan decision, how while there's no final call, Hurley praised Alex on his legacy and left the door open for any outcome. He said Alex has accomplished everything you can in college and more, and now it's just a life decision, which I totally understand. And I talked about that a while ago, about essentially being like, Alex has done enough for this program. If he wants to come back, open arms, right? He said his staff is leaving space and really encouraged him to seek advice only from smart, trusted people, not social media, not agents, and not people that have agendas. So I can tell you right now that the majority of people on social media that are UConn fans do not have an agenda. They are good people who are literally just saying, Alex, whatever you want to do, we're behind you. And that's my message to him. I know my buddy Jared Kotler, who does the Connecticut Scoreboard podcast, has interviews with him, and I'm sure they probably already have done a post mortem. But if he hasn't, I would basically ask him the question like, hey man, you know that UConn Nation is behind you, and the people that are miserable will always be miserable, and the people that will support you and love you are always going to be there for you. So kudos to Alex and his career. Hopefully he comes back, but if he doesn't, it is what it is. Hurley also acknowledged the criticism that followed him, the tunnel events, the viral videos, the media takes, and he owned it, but he also defended who he is. And I think that's Dan's prerogative. And I think it's his right to do that. I love that he's unapologetic about who he is as a person. I opened the show talking about how I made a mistake and was essentially shown the door at Locked On. And you guys can be mad at them all you want. It doesn't matter. The quote that I'm going to read to you is why I feel so undeterred by all of this and to continue doing what I want to do, which is, this is a quote from Dan. He said, all those that have criticized him, he said, it's my rocket fuel. It's what makes me successful. The players know what they're getting and they love it. So what I will tell you is I think you guys loved Locked On UConn. The Hoops Cap Pod is going to be a very similar show. You can even see it in the formula. Obviously, we don't have sponsors right now, so that's part of it. It's also going to house hopefully some other under the Big East Energy banner, some other Big East podcasts if people want to join me on this ride, from Marquette to Seton Hall to St. John's to, yes, even Providence. Obviously you can follow both of those on social media. And I just want some ownership over this stuff and to really focus on the things I want to talk about, not the agenda of a network. Right. So, and hopefully the agenda of the fans, what do you want to talk about? So, but that's why I relate to Dan, because no matter what criticism, no matter how much success or negativity that there is, he stays the same person. And I'm always gonna be the same person. I'm flawed. I make mistakes, obviously. Some are bigger than others, but if there's one thing that I am is I own my mistakes, whether it's a take or a life choice or whatnot, and I move forward. And that's the big picture. He also talked about how, this is a recalibration for the coaching staff. They're recommitting to the players and to the program, and, the pursuit of the portal. He said the destination wasn't that much fun, but I'm excited to get back on the chase. And so am I, man. I'm excited to to chase all of this with you guys, and really kind of hopefully bring you some insight that only I feel like I can. And if others want to join me on this ride, feel free to reach out. Would love some help. Dan, again, I've said this before, I relate to him on so many levels. And I'm just so grateful that I have the opportunity to do this stuff. And so I just want to say, before we kind of get into what I feel like are my top 5 players in the Hurley era, that he's brought so much joy to what felt like a dying side of the program. If you go to the Hoops Cap social media on X, the banner is 2 programs, 1 dynasty, 17 titles. 2 of those are for Dan Hurley. I don't think we'd be calling this program a dynasty if we were still in the doldrums of Kevin Ollie, or if we didn't kind of get over the hump with Dan, because there was a lot of, and myself included, there was a lot of people that were down on UConn. And I remember covering the SoCon and literally telling coaches in the SoCon, you should call UConn, get a bye game. You might get a win. Like, think about that. Don't do it now because you get your ass kicked, but like, the UNCGs of the world, the Wofford's, the Furmans, the ETSUs, those those programs that get bye games against larger programs. I don't even know. Maybe they listened. Maybe they didn't. Maybe UConn was smart enough not to play those teams because they were pretty damn good. But yeah, I was so down on the program. Didn't make me stop from rooting for them. I wasn't on X doing anything for really anything. Then I was mostly on Facebook because I'm an old head. And I remember like some of these memories I would get from that time under Ollie, and even in the couple years with Hurley at the beginning, was just like, God, this is so brutal to watch. Like, I remember one time I think I was talking about the game that they lost. It was I don't remember exactly, but essentially was talking about how much time was left in the game and how many points they scored, and I was just like, man, seeing JV boys basketball games have more scoring than this tonight. So I'm thankful for that he was able to move this program back to where it should be, which is a top 3-4 program in the country, if not the best. So, all right. I didn't do a list like where I'm going to show people, but like and this is all how I feel. I don't really top 5 lists, top 2 lists, top 20 lists are all based on people's perception and impact. It's obviously very, the last 2 years heavy, but I think you have to start with Tristan Newton as the best player in the Dan Hurley era. And I say that because this guy meant so much to this team. He comes in as a transfer. He remakes his entire essentially image. Wasn't always the most efficient, but he was clutch when you needed it. He was a Final Four most valuable player, an All-American. Kind of transformed himself into a guy that, very Kemba-esque, very Shabazz-esque. And I don't think you win back-to-back titles without him. That would be, I'm not even doing this in order. That's one. Then I would go Donovan Clingan. The impact that Donovan Clingan created on the defensive side was so impactful that in his freshman year, he didn't start and he didn't play probably more than 20 minutes most games, but yet Evan Miyakawa had him as, I think, his second most impactful player in the country that year, just based off of the minutes he would play. I'll never forget, like, my dad being like, hey, like, shouldn't this guy play more? And it kind of the very similar kind of discourse that people had when it came to this year with Terrace and Sampson, and play them together and all this other stuff. It's like, well, Dan has a process and he does things a different way, but Clingan from the jump was so impactful that it just made total sense that there was going to be a changing of the guard when Adama Sanogo went to the pros. And that leads me to Adama Sanogo. I mean, the dude could get a bucket whenever he wanted. If UConn didn't run the type of offense that they ran, if they ran a traditional like 90s ISO NBA offense, he would have averaged 30 points a game in college easily. Like, his footwork, he ended up becoming a good 3-point shooter. Like, but just from his post play, he had the feet of a ballerina. Like, he just at 260 pounds, whatever he was. And I, to this day, have said if he was born 10 years earlier, he'd be a pro, an all-star. I mean, think about guys like Corliss Williamson and Rodney Rogers, like those players, like that's who he was like. He wasn't maybe as athletic as a Rodney Rogers, but like 6'7", 6'8", and could just kind of get a bucket whenever he wanted. Post player, I mean, Karl Malone, power forward, like just an absolute beast. It's crazy to think that if Karl Malone was in today's game, he'd get drafted, but he probably wouldn't be like the player he was back in the day, because it's a different world. There's less posts, there's less freedom of movement, although he would have excelled in the pick and roll. But like all that stuff, like I feel like there's a part of me that wishes Adama was born in a different time. Then I think you have to go back to the guards. I think you go Cam Spencer. And mostly because of his impact, but also because of what he meant to Dan. Like those dudes were like brothers, like, or like, that's his big brother or uncle or whatever. Coming in as a transfer and honestly, a lucky transfer. We've talked about this a million times. Like Nick Timberlake was all set to come here and he went to Kansas because they gave him more money. If we get Nick Timberlake, I don't think we win a national championship last year. That team was good, but Cam was the straw that stirred the drink. Think about the game against North Carolina. Talking shit to Armando Bacot, like talking shit to everybody, and really just being who he is. Wanting all the smoke, and not to say that Steph Castle is the best rookie in the league right now in the NBA. So maybe he would have played a bigger part. So one could argue that I could see that, but I'm saying like just the roles that they had for this team. If you have a Nick Timberlake versus a Cam Spencer, I don't know if you end up getting the championship that we all love so much, the 37-3, the dominance, but here nor there. And then fifth one is tough because there's probably 20 guys you could go with, from like Tyrese Martin to Isaiah Whaley to Andre Jackson, to Andre Hawkins. But I'm going to go Ajax. I'm going to go Andre Jackson because, God, like he just was so, like he's a unicorn. He was just so weird, like 6'7". Like, have you seen the videos of him before he got to UConn in high school, just like dunking on everybody? I mean, the dude had to really work to have a semblance of a shot, but his athleticism was crazy good. And his defense, his attitude has to be on the list. And I'm sorry if I'm leaving people off. Like I hate to leave Hawk off. I hate to leave, really anybody else, Isaiah Whaley, Tyrese Martin, like guys from that era, RJ Cole. But if you're only doing 5, that's my 5. Okay. I have to say, it's a little weird not having transitions to go to different topics. I'm going to get that done at some point where we can kind of go from one thing to another. That way, if we do end up getting sponsors, we have that kind of transition. But all right, Sweet 16 tonight. I wish we were playing. I wish we had an opportunity to be in San Francisco where the Warriors play, because that's where the regional is. And you got the lineup is first game on CBS is BYU Alabama. Should be a good game. I think there's some real opportunity for BYU to win that game. They have a really interesting offense. They don't remind me of UConn, but Alabama does because they run similar stuff. But both these teams are really well coached. I think BYU is really trending in the right direction. There is 5.5 point spread. I'm not betting on this, but if I was, I would take BYU in the points if I'm being honest. And I think that there's some credence to it because I like the way Alabama plays, but I just think it's first off, it's going to be a shootout. Whatever I don't even know what the over under is. It's 175. Wow, that's a lot of points, and you may go over. So. And actually, the spread has dropped down to 4.5. So if you can find 5.5 and take the 5.5 points, I'm taking BYU all the way. Next game is Maryland, Florida. This one hurts because I feel like we should be in this game playing against Maryland, playing against a team with a coach that's essentially 1 foot out the door against Villanova. God, that's the thing, man. That's what's so frustrating is like we had this and we literally could be on the cusp of an Elite Eight. Because Florida minus 6.5, take the points. I think they beat this team by over double digits. I know Derek Queen is a really good player, and Gillespie is a good guard from Maryland. But Walter Clayton Jr. is probably the best guard left, but he's not the only one. This team has some incredible firepower that they really didn't show against UConn. Partly because of UConn's defense, but I just don't see I really don't see them having any trouble with Maryland. If you look at this roster, I said this in the live show that I did with Locked On Gators. Denzel Aberdeen is a game changer as well. And if he can come off the bench and give you 25 points. Alex Condon didn't play great against UConn, but Walter Clayton was great. Elijah Martin, I think, is a phenomenal player. These teams I don't think they're evenly matched, and I think UConn wins this game. Or Florida wins this game 92-79. Games. Duke, Arizona. Can Caleb Love do it again? Can Caleb Love beat Duke in a big time game like he did in the Final Four a couple years back when he was with North Carolina, and then he beat them the next year when he was at Arizona? So I think the answer to that question is yes, they can. Arizona's a good team. Like I think Duke is playing probably the best basketball of anybody in the tournament. But I'm taking those points, 9.5. These two teams met earlier in the season. Let me see what that score was. I think Duke actually won by 14 points. They won 69-55. Two things there. This isn't the same Arizona team. Arizona's played a tough schedule, much tougher schedule than Duke this year. Duke is a better team overall in terms of who they have. Cooper Flagg, Tyrese Proctor's playing like an all-pro. You got in Patrick and Jumba, the backup center that backs up Malawach, playing really well. So, yeah, can Duke blow this team out? Yes, but I think Arizona's got enough firepower to keep up with them. And I honestly think these Big 12 teams are very underrated. You got Arizona, BYU, Texas Tech, and Houston in the Elite Eight. So it's not like it's all SEC in Big Ten. When we look at this bracket, so I like Arizona in the points. I think Duke wins by like 5 or 6, and it's a pretty good game. And then in the nightcap, Arkansas and Texas Tech. Man, I love Arkansas. I'm taking those points, 5.5, and I'm running with it because this team is with Coach Cal, having them just play free and who gives a shit, like just getting after it. There's some volition to that in the tournament. You can go the opposite way, and if you play poorly, like his Kentucky teams have in the last few years, I get that. But I love Jonas Adu in the middle. He's given them kind of some stability when they don't have the dribble drive that he's pretty famous for. DJ Wagner's playing well. John L. Davis. The biggest X factor is JT Toppin for Texas Tech. Like, is he going to dominate this game? He could, but Jonas Adu is 6'11", whereas JT Toppin's 6'9" and is rail thin. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup. I know JT is more of kind of like a slasher power forward and can kind of get out on the outside. He shot 33% from three. But, man, I'm telling you, this Arkansas team, I'm tempted to take them straight up because, you got Jonas Adu, who has kind of come alive in this tournament. That's my X factor tonight. I love that. I love Brazil. This Razorbacks team is not is a team that I wouldn't want to see. Honestly, when they got Kansas St. John's, I think about it, they just beat Kansas and St. John's back to back. I know Kansas didn't have a great year, but they had a complete control over that game and kind of blew it, right? And then you look at this Arkansas team, playing against St. John's, and like just look at the box score. Carter Knox had a great game. I know Adu didn't score a ton of points, but 7 rebounds, 7 assists. Billy Richmond off the bench, the lefty freshman. That kid is solid. 16 points and 9 rebounds against St. John's. I'm loving this team, man. Take the points, take the money line, get after it. All right. This has been an episode, the first official episode of the Hoops Cap Pod. We really appreciate you jumping on. Go find us at the Hoops Cap right here at the Hoops Cap, at Big East Energy, and then at Marks Netto CBB. Everything you see on this screen. This will be on Big East Energy YouTube channel. I'm thinking about creating, more stuff for the Hoops Cat pod to kind of create a separate entity from Big East Energy, but it's going to be housed there for now. So again, this has been another episode of Hoops Cat Pod. I'm your boy, Mark Sonetto. Love you all. And as always, go UConn.